Carolina's backs are firmly against the wall, but here's my question. Are they playing like they realize it?
This is Tyler Hansbrough, and you're listening to Locked On Tar Heels.
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? It's Thursday, February 13th, 2025. Welcome into the Locked On Tar Heels podcast. It's the only daily North Carolina show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Schade. You're joining me at the place to get your Tar Heels content every single day. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Special shout out to all the everydayers joining us, all our great Locked On Tar Heels insiders, and of course, our Locked On Tar Heels Discord family. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Great stuff. Joining me today is our guy, Coach Pac Kilby. He is fresh off, by the way, his final regular season game of the season. They won on a walk-off free throw. Absolutely on the road. You don't want that noise in the state of Oklahoma. I'm just glad that you made it out alive and safe, Pac. And good news is now we get into the Oklahoma State playoffs starting Saturday. Good luck to the Dale Pirates with that hoodie you're rocking right now, Pac. Great stuff. Here's where we're going today. We've talked a couple times lately about Carolina's NCAA tournament hopes. Bleak as we may think they are, there is some hope out there. So we want to talk about it from a coach's perspective. And I'm going to ask Pac to weigh in on how you just maintain that down the stretch. We're going to look ahead. I haven't talked with Pac about the GM side of things and how helpful he thinks it is and what could be helpful about that. So we'll get into those two conversations. But here's where I want to go first, Pac. It is kind of an idea you've been thinking on and floating around with. So I just kind of want to let you have the floor and run with it a little bit. But basically this idea of, it seems from what Carolina talks about, both from a coaching standpoint and a player standpoint, to what we see happening on the floor, there seems to be a disconnect, and that there's not always the level of effort and attitude and execution that we need to see from this team, and that we expect to see, quite frankly, from any team that wears North Carolina across the front of their chest.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love the way you put that. We expect to see it. We should see it. And it should be, demanded that we see it from coaches, from players. And so it's just been really disappointing. And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. I've had some frustrations. I think a lot of us have had some frustrations with what we hear versus what we see, right? And, some things that come to mind is Coach Davis saying Jalen Washington is one of, if not the best shooting big men in the country, and then we don't see it. We've talked about, or we've heard Coach Davis talk about how it's just so important to keep getting back up and keep fighting and keep responding and keep doing all these things, yet we're not seeing it. We've heard players make comments about, when we put this Carolina across our chest, we've got to step up and bring it. Anything less is inexcusable, yet we don't see it. So, and it's not that I'm saying that we don't see it from all of them. Because I do think some of them are competing and some of them are fighting, but then I think some of them are going through the motions, and that's where you get into that. I'd rather us be cold or hot than lukewarm, right? It's like not everybody's in, so none of us are in essentially, and that's kind of the feel I get with this team right now is just that there's a lot more talking than there is walking. And we've got to get down to the walking part of it and start producing. And it's like you said in the cold open, it's our backs are against the wall. And Clemson was a great time for us to go make a statement. And it's not even that I was expecting us to go in there and win, but I expected us to fight. I expected us to be there and battle and see if we could be there in the end and give ourselves a chance. But instead, we laid down and we got walked over. And that is why I'm disappointed. If I felt like we showed up and we fought and we played a game and we just couldn't get it done because they were just better, okay, props to Clemson. And they probably are better.
I think they are. I think they're frankly, they are a better team than North Carolina this season.
Absolutely. But not 20 points better. We could have shown up and competed. And so anyways, those are my concerns. And it's exactly what you said. It feels like our backs are against the wall. but we're not playing like our backs are against the wall. We're not fighting. We're not showing that resiliency. And that's what's really concerning for me moving forward. Not just this year, frankly, like moving past this year, it's like who all's in, who all isn't in, what's that going to look like moving forward? I don't know. There's just a lot more questions than answers, and we've got 6 or 7 games left in the regular season.
It almost makes me wonder, Pac, at some level, if guys don't even realize what it takes, right? Like, let me just go to the ultimate example of someone who obviously realizes what it takes. Tyler Hansbrough. The dude's motor just never quits. And so it's easy for him. I love that you went to walk the walk, talk the talk, right? He doesn't have to do talking because literally every second he's on the floor, Energizer Bunny, that motor never turns off. At some level, it's like, I wonder if it's them not, like, from a psyche standpoint, not willing to compete. But I also wonder, like, maybe some of the guys don't understand just how all in, how committed, how every moment attacking you have to be successful, not just in college basketball, not just at the D1 level, not just in the ACC level, but for the University of North Carolina. Like, obviously, RJ understands that. Obviously, Seth Trimble seems to understand that. There are some other guys that I'm not sure they've got that figured out yet. And so maybe, like, Pac, I've even started to wonder if there's that disconnect where maybe some of the players think they're doing everything, giving it all, and really, in reality, what they think is 100% or all in and consistent is like 70%, and they've got a lot way to go to get to that headspace of 100%.
Yeah, I think that's very viable excuse or reason or whatever. I think a lot of times, hear me out here. I'm not saying for us to not recruit top tier talent, but I do think sometimes that a lot of these guys have had it easy their whole life, and as far as basketball goes, and they get to a level where they're challenged and things get a little tough, and then it's like, okay, we're going to find out if you've really got it or not. And sometimes they do and sometimes they don't, and they back away from that, they shy away from that. And I'm not saying that's what's happening in Chapel Hill, but I do think it's a possibility with some of our guys. Things have always been easy and now they're tough. And it's like, okay, are you willing to work for it? Are you willing to get it? Because it's like you said, I mean, it's not just a half commitment. It's not just something you can do half of the time or part of the time or think you want to be good and not have the work ethic to match it. And so I think, you might be onto something there with that. But then again, it still goes back to what I was saying earlier. There's some of them that do have it. Like you said, RJ, Seth, I think they kind of get that. And I think they understand what it takes. But there's a lot that I question. Do they really get it? Yeah. And the same question could be said about our coaching staff. Are they commanding, are they demanding these things from the players? And because they have to put the work in too. And sometimes you have to be willing to be the bad guy.
Yeah.
That's especially in Hubert's role. And, we really have yet to see that. And I'm not saying, to rip them to shreds and tear them down and beat them up and rip them apart. That's not what I'm saying. But a simple come sit your hind end down on the bench for a little bit, like Roy Williams used to do, can go a long ways.
You sure can.
And it just feels like sometimes we don't have that side of it either. We don't have that toughness being commanded from the coaching staff that leads to the players following suit. So that may be a big reason why we hear a lot of the talk, but not a lot of the walk. So
I think that's a fair and valid question. Like, what it takes me back to is like Caleb Love. I don't feel like the coaching staff ever held him accountable, at least publicly, right? We do not know. Let's admit this, Pac. We do not know the conversations going on behind closed doors, and those very well could be happening. And then the staff and Coach Davis in particular are just doing a great job of praising their guys publicly, because that is a value I hold dear. Privately rebuke, publicly defend, right? If they're doing that, great. But it just felt, if I'm going back to the Caleb Love era, he was never held accountable for his lack of efficiency or, some of those other things that were happening. And so I just wonder if we're seeing some of that again. And also, for you mentioned Seth. We've seen some comments from him lately that lead me to wonder: is Seth now starting to realize, hey, I've got an opportunity here to step into the void of leadership that we seem to have from a vocal standpoint, right? Like, I think part of being a leader is the on-court consistency that we've been talking about so far today, looking for. I think Seth is one of a handful of guys that's been doing that well. I think leadership is holding your teammates and yourself, by the way, accountable. Some of Seth's comments lately are leading me to believe that he's not taking that crap from anyone, including himself. And that is an encouraging sign to me. I don't know that he's going to do that, but he seems to be at least willing at this point to rise up and take some of that.
Absolutely, yeah. And if there's anybody to lead this team, maybe besides RJ, it's probably Seth, because I think he has, like we talked about, the work ethic to match the leadership. That leadership doesn't come just by getting by. It comes by being someone who works hard and just commands the respect of the people around them. And Seth does that. So it's really good to see him step up and kind of take that leadership role. And he's somebody who could be around moving forward. And that will be key for us.
That is a great point, Pac. This could be, if Seth truly is doing that, this could be a rest of this year and next year leadership opportunity, which is like, I think, aside from roster construction, the leadership void might be the second biggest issue on this team. I know there's a whole bunch of things we can talk about, but man, it's so clearly missing. Pac, you and I have not had a chance to talk much about NCAA tournament resume for the Tar Heels, as things have kind of unwound a little bit here. I would love to get your viewpoint as a coach on what it's going to take for Carolina to keep this thing together down the stretch, because even though it might seem bleak, there is hope. Slim though it may be, there is hope. We'll have that conversation in just a second. Right after I tell you about FanDuel. Hey, when the game tips off, the NBA action, man, is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off, or you want to get back in on like a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for an even bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay. It's great because when you win, you get paid instantly. How about this for some lines? I just noticed the other day that FanDuel already has some football lines out ahead of next season. It's got win totals for a couple ACC teams, and the Tar Heels are one of them. FanDuel has Carolina's win total set at 7.5. You just take the over or the under on that. Interesting stuff. I think I'm going over. I'll ask Pac about it here in just a sec. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to get in on that action today. Again, FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Pac, we're going to talk Carolina's NCAA tournament hopes, how you would keep this team together for this closing stretch. But I just mentioned in our FanDuel read, Carolina's football odds are set at 7.5 for win total. Over or under?
I'm taking the over. I personally am a huge believer in Bill Belichick. Been a fan of his for a while. Big fan of Tom Brady also. So anyways, I was pumped when we got him. I think the staff is really good. I like the additions from the portal. Seems like we've done some really good things with the offensive line. I'm feeling good about it. I'll take us to get at least 8 wins.
I like it. I've been trying to keep my mouth shut. I get like on the ACC squad show, man, like the Wolfpack hosts, they're always slamming me. I'm just like, okay. And I just keep my mouth shut because I can't wait to see what happens. Pac Kilby, NCAA tournament. We've talked about it on actually the last coast. Yesterday's show, I had mentioned how despite the Clemson loss, Joe Lunardi, ESPN's bracketologist, still has the Tar Heels in his first 4 out, which is better than I thought they would be. So rather than assuming that this thing is done and gone and over, and before we assume that the only way to get into the NCAA tournament is to win the ACC tournament, which would be awesome and guarantee it, it does seem like there is some hope for Carolina to get in. Why? Because you got to fit 68 teams into this field, and there's a whole bunch of middling teams that are just as bad as Carolina. Think about John Calipari at Arkansas right now. Things are not going well for them. They have a bad record. Yes, they beat Kentucky in Rupp. That's a great win. But guess what? They have, according to Lunardi, they are higher up on the list right now. So that's what we're talking about, man. There is hope for the Tar Heels. So, Pac, where I want to get to with you is approaching this from a coaching perspective. As a coach, obviously you've got to be able to look both big picture and small picture, keep yourself looking at both, keep the team looking at the side. Like how do you handle that? First off, just philosophically, how do you approach all of this down the stretch?
Well, I think, from a coach's perspective, I think Coach Davis is probably what I would be doing is looking and going, okay, seeing what you just talked about. Lenardi has us there, first 4 out. The net still has us in decent positioning. We've got everything we want that's still ahead of us. And so the second I learned that, I would probably have that conversation with the team, and talk about how the goals that we've set, they're still there to be attained. We may not win an ACC championship regular season, but we've got a chance to make a run in the tournament still, and we've still got a chance at the NCAA tournament where we could make a run there. So there's still a puncher's chance, but this is where you talk about the small picture, but it's going to take us being locked in one game at a time, one play at a time, doing our job every single play to get to where we want to go. And you really hold that over their heads in practice. You make sure that they remember that, hey, we've still got what we're fighting for ahead of us, and just really lock in on that as a team, come together, rally around that, and see where that takes you. At least that's what my thoughts are. But these games are so important. There's 6 of them here that we have a great chance to win, and you just can't overlook a single one of them. You can't take any of them for granted. You can't assume, oh, this is a Boston College, we're going to get a win and end up in overtime with them. You have to bring in every single game and give yourself a chance to win. So I think you really hone in on that. You talk about it with your team and, see where that takes you.
Pac, we've just been talking about in the previous segment about there's bad body language, right? I guess we didn't use that specific phrase, but I think that's part of the conversation we were just having in segment 1. And I think that leads me to then say, how do you get the guys to believe that what you just said is true? How do you get them to truly believe, because if I'm on this team, I would have trouble feeling like we do legitimately have something to fight for. Even if mathematically or probability wise, there is hope of the NCAA tournament. I've seen what we've not done this year. And I would have trouble staying locked in, as I'm imagining some of these guys are. So how do you get them to trust that what you just said is true and that you're not just coach speaking?
Yeah, well, that's the tough part right there, because I've never been a big believer in coaching effort and in coaching attitude. It's like, are they keeping score? Yeah, if they are, well, I want to win. If I'm having to motivate you to win something they're keeping score at, then I'm not feeling like we're on the same train. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah.
For me, that's kind of a struggle. I've never been great at that. But my thought is play the guys who want to win. And if you feel like there's bad body language, or they're not being coachable, or they're not doing what you're asking them to do on the court, come sit on the bench, To paraphrase Bobby Knight, butt meets bench, butt transmits signal to brain, tells body to play better, butt gets off bench and plays better. It's like that type of thing right there, I think would go a long way for our guys. It's like, if you don't believe what I'm saying to you, come over here and watch it from the sideline. So that would be a way that I would probably motivate them. I don't know if that's the way Hubert will go about it or not, but it's clear that there is still a puncher's chance for us to make the NCAA tournament, and that there's a path ahead of us. So those guys have got to buy in on it. And ultimately, coach could harp on it all he wants to. Those guys have got to be the ones that make that decision to get out there and get after it, and buy into that and give themselves a chance. And if they don't, well, that's going to be really, really tough for us to overcome.
Yeah. And one of the issues right now, Pac, is that I haven't talked about this on the show, but the Stanford loss has actually flipped now back into a quad 3 loss. So that hurts Carolina. They dropped to 77th at the net. They need to be back in that top 75. So just a small outside that, but would love to get that game back to quad 2. But I bring that up because of these 6 games, which, as you said, are all very winnable, Pac, 4 of the remaining 6 or excuse me, 4 of of this stretch of 6 before Duke, I should say. 4 of those are quad 3 games. The game at Florida State's a quad 2, and the game at home against Miami is a quad 4. So literally, the only one of those that you can lose, and it's not a massive ding on your resume, is the game at Florida State. Those other games are simply like, while the games against the Clemsons and the Duke are wildly important, equally important too is not losing games you can't lose, like that Stanford game, right? Because like somebody was asking me the other day, like, why is Clemson only a 7 seed right now? Because they got that win over Duke. And I said, absolutely. They got that win over Duke. But just like, let's say you were golfing and you get a hole in one. It's like, man, I should be at the top of the leaderboard. And it's like, well, you would be, but you had that triple bogey on that other hole. Meaning Clemson also has that Georgia Tech loss on their resume, which is a quad 3 loss. That's why they're down where they are. So all of these matter. So it's not just about beating Clemson or Duke. You got to win the games that are the games you're supposed to win. And Carolina, as you said, has a chance to do that, Pac, starting Saturday at Syracuse, then hosting State, then hosting Virginia, at Florida State, then hosting Miami, who beat this Syracuse team that we're playing Saturday. Miami's just second ACC game or win of the season. That was on Tuesday night. And then at Virginia Tech before the Duke game. So, Pac, very, very important 6-game stretch. But, baby, as you said, it is 6 one-game series that are all Game 7 of the World Series, and you got to make this thing happen. All right, guys, we want to end our conversation today with some GM talk. Obviously, I've talked about it on the show, but I've not had a chance to talk to Coach Pac about it. And I would love, similar to the conversation we just had, to get his thoughts on it as a coach. How would this be helpful to you and free you up to do the things you need to do? What would be hard about it? What would be like, is it a helpful thing to Carolina? All of that. And that's where we're going to go coming up here in just a second. Pac, it's been a little close to 2 weeks now since Coach Davis like publicly and firmly announced, yes, we are going to get a GM. One thing I said this on yesterday's show, I want to say it again to make sure it's clear. I think some people thought that meant it was an imminent thing, like that was going to happen this season. And then people have been like, Isaac, that's not going to help all the issues we're having. And it's like, well, it's not for right now. It's for next season and beyond. So I just want to say that first off about the GM hire. This is not something that fixes the 24-25 Tar Heels. That's a whole separate entity. But Pac, as I said, I want to approach this from a coach's point of view. For you, as you think about a GM in the landscape of college basketball as it exists today, how would hiring a GM make your life as a head coach better?
Well, I think as Carolina fans, we can kind of find a lot of relation in this if we just slide over and look at our football program. Lombardi has been awesome, I think.
Agreed. Agreed.
He's a right-hand man to the head coach. He's another voice for the program that has the same direction as the head coach. He's a visionary for recruiting, a visionary for NIL, and he is a just open book on what player in what position group is worth what amount of money.
Yeah.
And I think that is very critical for just major college sports and Power 5. In the Power 5 world, major sports, football, basketball, baseball, where they're spending a lot of money, you almost have to have something like that. It's just too much. If you want your head coach to focus on coaching basketball, and in this case we do, you want someone by their side that can help them make those decisions, can be another voice for the program, can help on the recruiting trail, that can fundraise NIL money and tell you how to appropriately spend it, how to help build your roster. So I think those things are critical. And I know it's going to largely depend on who we hire for that role to determine how I feel about it. But I think it's going to be a major help. And I like the point you made. It's not going to correct anything for this season, but it could sure make a big difference moving forward. And I think it's past time for us to have made this decision.
Pac, I want to ask you about like how it could be hard. And before I do that, though, one of the things that makes it work so well with hiring Mike Lombardi to go with Bill Belichick is because they have this decades-long relationship of understanding and trusting one another. Like I've heard Lombardi say basically good grief, it's gone now. Lombardi say, I got bubble talk, I got all this on the brain. Basically say like, I know who Bill is looking for. I know the prototype. I know the player. I know the traits, all of that. I mean, maybe Coach Davis has somebody like that he's going to get, but odds are it's not. I mean, it just can't be at the same level of connectivity that Coach Belichick and Lombardi have, because he's not had that person by his side doing these things. So how do you find somebody who you can bring in, imbue the DNA of what you're looking for into, so that they can inherently know how to do that without having to check back in on you all the time? So basically, I think my question is, how do you build the trust that Coach Belichick and Lombardi have?
Well, that's going to be tough to do. I mean, I think first of all, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, they are, aside from their football, their working relationship, I think it's safe to say those two are very close friends and have been for a long time. So they think very similarly. They're on the same page. They have the same vision. In Hubert's situation, we're obviously not going to walk right into something like that. But, I think that could be okay. I really do. I think in a lot of ways that may be needed. We don't need someone that thinks like Hubert. We need someone that can help him see things differently, potentially. And so I think it could be a good thing. But this is where it gets tricky, and this is why it can be hard to get to answering your question. Hubert has got to maybe not micromanage, maybe give a lot of trust to whoever he hires, and trust them to do their job. And that could be very hard to do because from what I gather and what I've seen, and even what I've heard him talk about or allude to, he does micromanage, and he wants to have his fingerprints on a lot. Because he said, openly when he was talking about the GM, he said, when I got this job, I didn't think I was going to need that. But he's come to that realization he does. And so he needs to hire somebody that he feels that he can trust and allow them to do their job and help shape and mold the roster. And then, if he can turn that over and that person can do a good job with that, then that's how you're going to build your trust. But it's not going to be easy to do that at all. But it's needed. And I think in this way, like I said, I think for Carolina basketball, we don't need somebody right now that thinks just like Hubert. We need someone that's a little different. Yeah. And I'm, this could be hot topic. I don't know, but I'm not opposed to hiring someone that's not from the Carolina family.
I agree. I'm right in that with you. I agree.
I just, it's not that I'm opposed to hiring someone from within the family.
That's true as well.
It's the right hire, but I think it's okay for us to get someone that thinks a little bit differently than us, and maybe open our eyes to something. And, just look at Roy Williams' staff. I mean, Coach Rob was not from North Carolina, and he brought him with him, and he was a beloved member of the staff for a long time. So we can bring in outsiders and welcome them to Carolina, and they can do a great job. So it won't be the first time that's happened.
I've said it so many times lately. Dean Smith is a Jayhawk, for crying out loud. It's like, Pac, you said so much that's right in there. I almost think of it like if I'm the president and I am a Democrat, I think it would be important to have a Republican or two in the cabinet, or vice versa. If I'm a Republican, I think it would be important to have a Democrat in the cabinet, just because it's like you think better when you see through the eyes of somebody that doesn't think and act and believe like you, right? And so if you can get somebody whom you trust, has your best interest at heart, but that you can have good, healthy dialogue and back and forth with. And I think that's the chat. Like, I don't even need to ask you now, like, what's the hard in it? Because you've just answered all of that, right? But as you said, I think here's a couple of the key phrases you use, Pac Kilby. If he will be willing to trust that person, if it's the right hire, right? Like it's not about pedigree, part of the family, not part of the family. It's just got to be the right person, whatever their background is. And that's what's got to be figured out. Similarly to, like, you got to be able to evaluate your roster better, what you need and who you need. Man, this is the critical person that's going to do that. And so you got to be able to now evaluate who that is and how they fit as part of your staff. So all of that is true, man. That's a great conversation, Pac. Great insight. My man, great show today. Lots of fun conversations. I'm so grateful to you and your thoughtfulness. Best of luck to the Pirates this weekend as you start the state tournament. Hope you just go sweep the floor. I don't know, break their legs. I don't know what Pirates do, but there you go. Folks, if you've not subscribed to the show on video and audio, make sure you do that. On YouTube, we're so close to 10,000 subscribers. We're less than 200 away. Help us get there, man. We're trying to do it and would love your help. Subscribe right now. You be the next one. If you've not joined the Locked On Tar Heels Insiders, that's the way to go deep with the show. Next level, in direct interaction with me. Lots of access to other perks and stats and charts and all sorts of great stuff as well. That link to join is in the show notes, as is the link to join the Locked On Tar Heels Discord. We would love to have you there. Y'all, it's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. We'll be back tomorrow to get ready for that trip to Syracuse. Oh, that sounds miserable. I do not like how cold that is. We'll talk again then, but until then, Pac Kilby, you know the deal. Tell them.
Peace.